You're watching All to Play For, brought to you by Joe and Coral.
Hello and welcome to the All to Play For Euro 2020 post-match podcast brought to you by Joe and Coral with me, Lynsey Hipgrave, and you, Joe Cole. And Joe, I feel like I've got to start by apologising to our last guest, Ali McCoist, for my 5-0 England win prediction. I've thought about my behaviour and I was definitely misguided.
I think the comparisons to Panama, Linz, was the straw that broke the camel's back with Ali. We'd love to get him back on as a guest, and I think as a forfeit, you should wear a full Panama kit for the, especially if Scotland go through.
I'd rather the Panama kit than the Scotland kit. He's not going to be happy. But where did you watch the game?
I watched it at home, Liz. I find it easier at home because you can concentrate more. So like I've slept on it. You know, I think I experienced the same emotions most England fans would have experienced last night, because we get so up for it, don't we? And then when it don't go our way, we get disappointed and we start really, you know, I think the standard thing would be Gareth's formation and the players he picked, but you know, there's so many things to digest after that game. You know, you have to put an asterisk on the Scottish team that performed admirably, but we still need to say that you know, they've still not scored a goal at the Euros, and they've only got 1 point. So there's that to contend with. But from England's perspective, it was disappointing. But if you're going to go and win a tournament and you've got to play 7 international games, they're not all going to be masterpieces. So when we pick the bones out of it, we've got to pick the positives out of it, and we've got to look at what we think we can do better, and also where do we think Gareth's going to go with it against the Czechs.
I think because it was Scotland, though, there was just so much build-up and so much buzz around that and so much pressure on them. But it was just so flat and so disappointing. It was like they were up for it more. Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that in the media today, that the lad's been accused of that. I think I really have been an admirer of Andy Robertson, and I think he's an excellent player, an excellent captain. And you see the way that his body language and that really lifted the Jocks, and they was up for it, and everything leading up to the game was about the Scots coming down and being in London and the festival and a carnival, and there was a trepidation. And I was watching it on telly and looking at Graham Souness, and he was obviously engaged in the game, and the similar feelings that he was getting was what I was getting in the Champions League final, Linz. You know, when you turn up at the game, you know, we talk about tactics and that, but sometimes there's an energy in the crowd, and there's an energy, and there's something that's probably much more mysterious than anything we can understand. But I got the feeling that when I turned up in Porto that Chelsea were going to do it, and the closer the game it got, it grew. The energy was there, and I found that with the Scottish team and the fans, and I felt like from the outside looking in, it felt like the Jocks were on it emotionally and mentally, and the English just wasn't quite at it. But no harm done, Linz. We've still got a point, and I think we'll comfortably go through the group.
It felt like if that John Stones header had gone in after 5 minutes, it could have been a completely different game, do you think? Because it would have sort of settled England down and knocked their confidence.
Yeah, goals change games. It's an old saying, and it's, you know, you're reluctant to use these old sayings because they've been around for years. But when John, he should have scored. He got up too early, you know, and you should be scoring that. But it would have settled England down. But there was definite things that England need to do better going into the next game. And I said at half time, I made some notes to myself, and I think since the World Cup semi-final, that is Gareth Southgate's biggest challenge, was that half-time team talk. You know, how does he, and it will set the tone for the tournament. And he come out in the second half, and it just, we limped over the line. You know, so these next few days are when Gareth and Steve and all the team around him will have to find a way of picking the bones out of it, finding 2 or 3 things, elements in the game where we can improve, and really knuckling down on that. And it might be tactical. It might just be, a chat with Harry Kane because, you know, Harry Kane has had a long season, you know, at Spurs where, you know, it hasn't gone well for the club. He's got a big move pending, you know, something on his shoulders, you know. He said his mate Ericsson, who he's played with for years, had that incident. Harry Kane, and it's the first time in his England career where there's been some question marks. Not from me. I don't have question marks on him in terms of quality, but there is people out there insanely questioning whether he should start, you know, in the game. So
he had 19 touches, Joe, which I think is the fewest he's had in an England game when he's played more than 45 minutes. I think it's both games as well, though, isn't it? I mean, that's why there's
definitely something wrong.
Been flat.
There's definitely something not wrong. There's definitely something that's not quite right with Harry at the moment. Now we need to look at. What
do you think it is? Do you think that all this speculation around his future is having an effect?
I reckon if we could sit down and speak to Harry, he'd tell you no, but he won't think it is. You know, first of all, top level footballers can have poor games, right? That's for sure. But you look at the backdrop of it all, and you know where his future lies. You're not giving him excuses because he wouldn't want that because he's a top player, but. You know, I think he needs to draw the line under these two performances, really just soul search for a little bit and just say, look, you know, speak to his family, speak to his friends, because there's no doubt about it. He is the talisman. He is the outstanding talent, and he could go and play for any team in Europe with the ability he's got. And I believe he's a leader, very different to types of leaders I've had, but I believe he's a leader. You can see that in his body language and the way the lads look up to him, the way they look for him on the pitch with the ball. So I think he needs a little, like, I think it's Gareth, you know, needs to maybe just have a chat with him in his ear, just, you know, put him at ease. Tell him if he's going to play him against the Czechs, tell him now. Because as footballers, you know when you don't play well, and you're not silly. You read the papers, or you know that there'll be people calling for him not to start against the Czech, whether it be for a rest or whether it be to have a look at someone else in that position.
Would you start him?
Yes, I would start him. If he'd played well, Lyns, and he was firing all cylinders, I wouldn't start him. I'd give him a rest because this is a tournament. You've got 26 players, you've got to manage it. But I feel he needs a game. He needs a game. And we need him to get a goal and get a performance out of him. So I'd play him. I'd maybe play Rashford and Sterling up front with him. In this game, I'd mix it up a lot, Lyns, because I'd rest certain players, because I don't feel like. I think, listen, it's harder to get knocked out of this tournament than it is to go through because of the numbers. So I think even with 4 points, we're going to go through, you know, and you know, you can duck and dive and look at whether do we go first and we play the group of death winners, second place in the group of death, or do we go second and maybe we'll get, you know, it's questionable.
It would be Slovakia or Sweden if we finish as runners-up. So you think maybe it's all part of the plan. A draw against them could actually work out better for us on Tuesday.
Exactly. But you cannot, you as a manager, you've got to get your players in. You know when the games are. You know roughly when, if we go through, we're going to play on Friday or Saturday. And so you've got to think to yourself, right, how do we get my players physically, mentally and emotionally right for these games, you know? And then you go through all of the players and where their heads are at. Harry Kane's head will be in a place where it's probably not been in his career for a long, long time, since he was toiling. You know, who's doubted Harry Kane, apart from in the days when Spurs were sending him out on loan to Leighton or at Millwall? You know, he hasn't experienced this for a long time. I have no doubt that he'll come back and play a big part of this tournament. But you know,
can we afford to keep giving him chances when he's in this form? You know, we need to build momentum as well.
It's true. I mean, we do need to build momentum. But I said before the tournament, if we're going to win this tournament, we need Harry Kane. Like, Harry Kane. Like, I liken it to like you look at the contrasting strikers from last night, right? And you Shea Adams, yeah, and Lyndon Dykes, two good players, and they was excellent, outstanding. You know, but both of them had half chances, and they both didn't finish them. Harry Kane ain't had a half chance yet, and the difference is even Harry Kane, not at it, not playing well. You put him in front of goal with 5 minutes to go. There's no better player in the world, barring probably Ronaldo, who can score all types of goals, headers, volleys, finishes, near post, far post. You know, so there's always that. The quality will always be there. So,
does he need better service?
Better rhythm. There needs to be a rhythm around him that there isn't there at the moment. Now, when I was looking at the game, if I go from back to front, Lynch, right? Sorry if I'm not answering your questions directly, but so you had the Pickford, Mings, and Stones situation. Now, Pickford, you know, I've questioned him, but he would be in a great place. He's had 2 clean sheets. Yeah. He's been working with a sports psychologist, which seems to be working because I'm loving his body language. I'm loving he seems there's a maturity to him, which I think is fantastic. You need to have a goalkeeper on form. So Pickford, you feel like you ain't got to worry about that. Stones and Mings, if we look at the Romania game before, we was worried about England playing 2 centre-halves. Are they good enough to compete? I know it's
in the Croatia game,
but they've played well. They put ticks by them that they're not worried about them at the moment. They'll be pretty good about themselves. Now, Rice and Phillips playing in there in front of them, that's protected them. That's helped having 2 in there. But we've lost a bit of rhythm out of the going forward. You know, so Mount, who's had a decent tournament so far, Sterling, who got the goal in the first game, you know, you need more bodies around them. And then you get to the question of whether Jack should play or not. Now, I've always said Jack should play. Always, always, always. From even before, Jack has had this season where he's gone from being a player with a lot of potential to a player where the top clubs in the country and the world are calling for him. So the reason I think he's made and born for international football in the same reason that our colleague Glenn Hoddle, you know, when I look at him, I've played more times for England than Glenn Hoddle. Now, Glenn Hoddle's the best player we've ever produced, right? So we didn't ever get a handle of, and when I speak to Glenn, he played out on the left, out on the right. And then when you look back from hindsight and you think, why did we not build a team around him? Now, I don't want us to be looking in 20 years' time and looking at Jack Grealish's England career and going, well, he went to the Euros and he played 30 minutes against Scotland and he had a 20-minute, and then we got knocked out and he only had 20 minutes, but he didn't do nothing. Jack needs rhythm. Now, Jack's ideal for international football. You know, he'll draw in sound.
He was ideal for that game last night as well, Joe, didn't you? Felt like that game was made for him. It makes you wonder whether he's not fully fit, and that's why he's not starting.
Yeah, see, that's. I mean, he finished the season with Aston Villa. He's fully fit. Is he at the top part of his game? Probably not, because he hasn't had the games. So you have to put him in these games, Lins, in my opinion. You know, it's my humble, like, you know, I'm a big fan of Gareth, and I believe he's seeing him every day in training. He knows what he's in. But look, he's 25 now, Jack, right? So there's the fact that someone as talented as Jack Grealish hasn't started in an international tournament for England, and he's 25 years old, tells me that the system we've got is good. It's not perfect. I feel like the managers he's had sometimes previously at England youth level, 21s level, and his club football haven't got the best out of him. You know, and I genuinely believe that up to this point. But also, we've not trusted him like we should done, in my opinion. And I know I've been stoic with that. I've been right from the start with Jack. I played with Jack at the back end of my career, so I know what he can do. So listen, you're going to get. It's easy to say, "Oh, Jack Grealish." Yes, Jack Grealish, with the right players around him, with responsibility. And one of the things he done, Lyns, as well last night, which when Shea Adams had that chance at the back post where he skied it, who was there defending in the right position, throwing his body at him? It was Jack Grealish. It's like people, for some reason, we get a habit of thinking, oh, he's like some absolute liability. He knows where to be defensively. He digs in. He's a tough man. He wants to win. He's dragged Villa from relegation up until the last 4 or 5 weeks. People were thinking they could get into Europe, as a captain. So you ain't got to worry about him. We've got to get out of the habit of thinking, it will loosen us up in midfield with Jack in there. It won't. It will make us a better because we've got one of our most talented players in the team. So I'm a big believer in him, but I'm also a big believer in Gareth, you don't
think he got it tactically wrong last night and Steve Clarke got it completely tactically right, and there's questions for Gareth Southgate to answer this morning?
Listen, the life of a manager, there'll be questions. There'll be questions to answer. We have to remember, and we have to put some context on it, that the champions of the Euros are Portugal. Now, they did not win a game of football in 90 minutes. So there's ways to win this tournament, right? And every game will not be a masterpiece. There will be questions asked, and that's what if you want to plonk yourself on that seat at Wembley as England manager, there's going to be some absurd criticism coming your way, and there'll be some absurd praise. Gareth could have probably run for Prime Minister after the last World Cup and got the job on the back of getting England to the semi-finals.
Couldn't have done a worse job.
Well, yeah. Well, that's another.
Let's not go there
altogether. Yeah. But yeah, so you've got your absurd criticism, you've got the absurd praise. Gareth, as much as I know him, will be able to balance that out, and this is a challenge for him, and he'll have to stick by his beliefs. He's got a big decision to make over Harry Kane, big decision to make at left back, big decision to make over what formation do we play against the Czechs and going forward. So listen, this is what he's here for, and I still believe in him. I would have played Jack against Croatia, but there you go.
You're watching All to Play For, brought to you by Joe and Coral.
Tuesday. This is why you love international football. Thursday. The best ever goalless draw. Saturday. These guys might be underdogs, but you wouldn't miss this match. Every match day matters. So every time you collect 3 match day stamps, you get a £5 free bet. Match day rewards from Coral.
You talked about the criticism there. It was a really young England side. I think the youngest side we've ever put out at an international tournament. Those players are going to be reading a lot of criticism today in the papers, on social media. I'm sure some of them might completely avoid it. But how do you think that will affect them? How did it make you feel when you were reading that sort of thing when you play for England?
I think every player will react differently. Every player. Some players will take it in their stride. Some players will be a little bit annoyed. Some players will be fearful. Some players will be completely oblivious to it. So it's Gareth's. And one of the things I consider when I think of playing players for England, people talk about play your best players, or do you choose a system and then get the players in? Playing for England requires a mental toughness and steeliness above and beyond club football, because you have to be able to adapt, because you're coming out of your comfort zone and you're into this fire. You might be asked, you need to be able to do things. So it needs a personality. So it needs like people like Jack Grealish. I saw him last night being brought on, and he's putting his shin pads on, he's getting ready. And he knows that the whole country's calling for him. He knows that every fan in the country wants him to come on. He knows the pressure. I'm looking at him laughing and joking with players. There's a certain mindset and a certain character that thrives in international football. As well, I think James Maddison as well. I know he's not there. He's not in the squad. But when I think of characters to go and play for England, they're the characters you want. The fearlessness, almost bordering on arrogance. That's what you want playing for England. I mean, I've played with some fantastic players for England, Lins, and I could see in their eyes walking out onto the pitch or off the pitch, that the fear, the trepidation. You know, I had one player that was coming off the pitch and he was talking about worrying about getting a 6 in the paper the next day. And I remember looking and thinking, what are you worried about? You know, it don't matter. So there's a certain mindset of players that's required to play for England. So I think that's going to come into Gareth's mind coming into this game, because there will be pressure on the Czechs. And look round, which one of these players? Oh, sorry. Which one of these players? Yeah. Which one of these players? Which group of these players is the ones most likely to be able to just block out all the noise and go and do it?
What did you think when he took Foden off at that point? Because it felt to me like, of all the front four, the one that was likely to make something happen at that point was Phil Foden. Yeah,
I mean, I understand why he did it, because he would have been looking at the game balanced, you know, and he'd have been looking at it and he'd be thinking, do I throw an extra player on it? Because England hadn't had control of the midfield. So he's just gone for a very sort of safety first approach by bringing off Phil, like for like, wasn't it? Jack come on for him, didn't he? Am I right? Was that the right substitution?
when Jack came on, and it just felt like Kane had to come off at that point, or Sterling right then. And I don't know. I think that safety first approach is what's going to start frustrating fans if it not already is.
Yeah, I think it's certainly frustrating the fans, but I understand why he did it. I wouldn't have done it. I would have got. I'd like to think, you know, like I said, it's hard, Lynsey. Even though I've played for as long as I have, I've not sat on that bench and made them big decisions. I'd like to think I'd be brave enough and bold enough to have gone, right, maybe take off Tyrone Mings, drop Declan in, you know, then maybe put Grealish and Mount in the middle together with Phillips sitting in there. We'll have more control over the ball. Yes, we might get caught going the other way, but what a message then that sends out to Scotland, you know, when you're doing things like that, you know. But I understand why Gareth did it, because Gareth wasn't happy with the midfield, in my opinion, the control of the midfield, because I thought McGinn was outstanding. Gilmour was outstanding.
I want to ask you about Gilmour as well, George. Just 20. I know you know him. It was his first international start. Just how impressed were you with his performance last night and the player he's becoming?
Yeah, not surprised at all. Again, when you look at the attributes for international football, Billy will play over 100 times for Scotland. That's no doubt in my mind. Outstanding footballer, outstanding football brain.
The composure.
I was listening to the commentary, and I didn't quite agree with it. It was saying he looked, you know, you always have to sort of, you know, they're at the game, so they're seeing more than we get to see on the television. So, but it's saying he looked a bit leggy and a bit, you know, like the pace of the game was too much for him. I didn't think that. I thought from the off he got the pace of the game. The role he was playing, Lyns, in there, he did have a lot of running to do, covered a lot of ground. I've played that role in the midfield where you have to keep getting out to the fullback and then you're almost doing two jobs. But I don't think physically, I think physically he was fine. And his mindset was just, there's one point in the game, he brought the ball down, brought on his chest and just fizzed the ball. It's a 10-yard pass on the half volley through the lines and they got him going. Now, it may look to the naked eye that was an easy pass, but it wasn't. And he's such a talented player. You need, again, that's what England lacked. They needed someone in there who had the ability to play them little fizz balls through and not rely. I'm not saying Declan or Phillips, they've got other attributes. They're fantastic players in their own right, but someone in there of that ilk could really get on the board, certainly with the last 20, 25 minutes. That's why I think dropping Mount in there with Jack, leaving Foden, Sterling and Kane up there to occupy the back five, I think would have been pleasantly surprised and would have started to get a bit more of a handle on the midfield.
And just finally, Joe, how do you sort of see this group now? Because all four teams can still qualify. As we said earlier, England, a runners-up finish, could end up being better when we look at the draw. And Scotland are really going to fancy their chances against Croatia now.
Well, the Scots have got it all to do. Croatia will be a bit of a wounded animal. They would have fancied their chances quietly to win this group. You have to remember they're World Cup finalists. Ballon d'Or winner Luka Modric in the middle. So Scotland have it all to do. The Czechs, I think, have been fantastic. Schick, have I said his name right?
Patrick Schick, yeah, he's been a revelation. He's been a revelation.
He has. I like his the way he plays. He looks like a player that enjoys playing for his country. So they've been a revelation. Like I said, I think 3 teams will probably go. I think they're one of the best third places. I think 4 points will be enough. Like I said, but I think we'll go and beat the Czechs, Linz. You have to think. Don't panic. Do not panic. That country, don't just look at it in a cold light of day. It was an indifferent performance by a group of lads in a high pressure game, which when we look back on the tournament, this could be the moment where them players, their steeliness is forged, togetherness is forged. Let them bring that group together and say, look, don't get caught up with the hype. This is us. This is our group. Let's go and beat the Czech Republic. And by the way, simple message, how many of them players would get into this squad? And there's hardly any. So go out there, play your game, puff your chest out, be proud, be brave, go and get on the ball, go and score some goals, go through, and then we'll see where we're at. And then if we've got France, if we've got Germany or Portugal, what we got to lose? Nobody will expect us to beat them. No one would expect us to beat them now. So listen, be positive. We can do it. We just need to keep a level head.
Who was your man of the match?
Well, it's going to have to be a Scottish player. I thought Billy Gilmour was very, very good. But Robertson, for me, I love the kid's mindset.
McTominay was excellent as well.
McTominay was top class. Another one with a great mindset. You're right, spot on there. I think Robertson really led that team really well. Everything. So I'd go with him. From England's perspective, I think I wouldn't say man of the match from England, but I think that little trifecta, Mings, Stones, and Pickford. Let's not forget we've kept 2 clean sheets at tournaments now in the first 2 games. So that is something.
I think we've kept 14 in the last 18 games we've played. So that's one positive, I suppose.
Yeah, listen, that's what I mean. You can look at it in any way you want to look at it. And Gareth's job is to cut out all the noise, not listen to people like me, ex-players, fans, will all have an opinion. But ultimately, it don't mean nothing because it's Gareth and his team will be they'll be having a coffee today. They'll be watching the game. They'll be, what's happening with my phone? Sorry. they'll be comparing notes and they've got to get the battle plan right for Czech Republic and going forward. And, we've got to believe in Gareth. We have
Whose
to believe
place is in jeopardy, do you think?
I think there'll be... I think nobody's now done a left-back slot. So I think Luke Shaw, Chilwell deserves a chance in this game. I think he does. The way he was outstanding in the final where he kept Mahrez quiet. I think Reece James, I think we expected more from Reece. For one reason or another, he didn't. He was too pensive. Player of his ability, he should have really grabbed that game by the scruff of his neck. So he'll be looking over his shoulder. I think Kyle Walker's probably the number one.
that brilliant clearance off the line, didn't he? That moment really stood out, though.
Look, Reece James will play over 100 times for England. I have no doubt in my mind he's an outstanding player. Whether he gets the nod. So I'm trying to put myself in Gareth's shoes now. I think as well, I think Phillips might. I know he's been outstanding in the first game and he was okay and we kept 2 clean sheets. He might unluckily lose his place to someone with a little bit more of a forward-thinking mindset, someone in there. Listen, Harry, as crazy as it sounds, he may rest Harry Kane. He may rest Harry Kane. He may rest the whole front three. It's a tough decision he's got to make because everything's in the balance.
I think part of the problem is he doesn't know what the best 11 is. It's not really obvious, is it?
It's not obvious, and it's how you perceive that. Do you think it's a negative or do you think it's a positive?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a bit of a negative for us. It just doesn't. Whereas France, you feel like you can just write down their best 11 and it's really obvious. I think for us, it's not clear and it's not a good thing.
No, yeah, I can understand that.
It's great to have the options and everything, but if
this was a club football, Linz, and this was a 60-game season, there'd be 5 or 6 players he could leave out for the next game, and but when it's a tournament and it's such a short space, intense time to work with the players, he may be reluctant to change as many as people are going to imagine him to change, and like I said, he's very loyal, Gareth, to his players. He's done the job for him. So there'll be more questions than answers on his mind as his head hits the pillow, I'm sure.
I don't think any of the top teams would have watched that last night and thought, I really don't want to play England. Is it still coming home?
Linz, it's still coming home. Of course it's coming home. There's no doubt about it. Until it's not, it's coming home. And yes, and that might be a positive. It may be a positive that no one's looking at us. Let them talk about France. Let them talk about Italy. All these other teams, let them grab the limelight because nobody remembers the group games. Apart from moments, if there's a great goal or something people don't remember, no one remembers it. It's going to be the semi-finals and the finals. Get through the group, regroup. I don't know the situation with COVID or anything like that. Use the benefit that we're in our own country. Them lads would have been emotionally drained after that game. Send them home to their families. Go on. Go and,
I'm not sure they can. I don't think they can now. It's started. That's the thing. So it'll be back to St George's Park.
Such a shame. Can the families come in with a COVID test? Let them go or let them go and play golf. Let them go and do that. Let them go into town or whatever they do. I know it's. I'm not really up on what the COVID rules and regulations are for the tournament, but use that benefit. The lads need to forget about football for 24, 48 hours and not even go and talk about whatever the young lads talk about nowadays and just get their minds right.
I could do with forgetting about football for 24 hours, but there's too many good group of death games on today. So now I'm going to go and watch France and just think they're going to smash us if we ever have to play them in this tournament.
Don't worry. We will be all right. Listen, if we played France in the next round, don't worry about us. We will have a chance. This is not. It's never as far away as it seems. After a performance like that, it seems like a million miles away, but it's not. A few little tweaks, the right things said in the right era at the right time, and we could end up with a performance like Euro '96, England versus Holland, all over again. And you've got to be positive, and we're positive on this podcast. We don't mess about. We're gonna do it.
I love your optimism, Joel. Thank you very much, as always.
I'll
see you soon. See you next week. We're back in the pub, back in the All to Play For arms. We've got England legend John Barnes with us as well. So you've been listening to the All to Play For podcast, brought to you by Joe and Coral.
You've been watching All to Play For, brought to you by Joe and Coral.